Welcome to the AI and Faith podcast. We are a community of expert technologists, professionals, and faith leaders bringing the ancient wisdom of the world's major religions to the ethics of artificial intelligence. Join us on this new journey and welcome to the conversation. My name is Pablo Salmones, and I will be your host for today. In today's episode from an event in July 2023, AI and Faith advisor Vikram Modgil, an expert now working with Amazon in augmented reality and synthetic voice, reflects on opportunities and ethics surrounding cutting-edge synthetic reality. He also shares what he has learned from starting the Seattle tech discussion group The Good AI, and what's faith got to do with all of this. Listen now to our conversation. So as a first question, why don't you tell us exactly what do you do at first at Amazon Chime SDK and then what you do at the Good AI?
Yeah, sounds good. So at Amazon Chime SDK, I'm part of the product team, which is our platform. It is called Amazon Chime SDK. And it is a communication platform as a service. So if somebody needs to add communication primitives. So we have communication primitives. Somebody needs to add those in their apps. A good example would be Uber. If you're trying to reach the driver, or DoorDash delivery, all these applications, they use a similar infrastructure from cloud. So there are several things you need to take into consideration: the security, the privacy. They should not see each other's actual numbers. So there is a rerouting of the call in a very real-time manner. There's also different routes a call can take based on location, etc. So to optimize cost and performance. So there's several things that happen behind the scenes when you reach a Uber driver. And then once your session is over, once your ride is complete, after a certain time, those numbers are recycled so that there is no standard, like you cannot just call back that number and reach the same person again for security reasons. So that way there is enough privacy ensured. So we ensure all of these things. There's a lot of analytics. There's a lot of communication and AI services that AWS has. So our platform helps integrate and connect with those services on the call analytics, large language models, etc. There is also a lot of data storage. So I know we struggle with recording initially right now, but there's some streaming services that we have. And then there is Amazon S3, which is world's largest recording system, or largest storage system, sorry. So there are all these different services that are linked to communication directly or indirectly. And our platform facilitates all of that, from the primitives of communication, voice, video, messaging, all the way to leveraging the AI machine learning and data sources within AWS. So that's what the platform does. And I'm responsible for global partnerships. So my partners include telcos, SI, system integrators, software companies, and a bunch of technology providers in the entire stack of communications. So that's my current role. I've only been here just over a year. So currently, I'm in New York, so I'm not in my home office or my actual office. I'm traveling for some conferences here. Generally, I'm based in Seattle, and my role involves working with partners on various initiatives to enable and onboard partners, and then figure out what are the most burning problems in communication spectrum that we can address together and support them. But before Amazon, as you mentioned, I started this Good AI nonprofit org. This was back in 2018. So I got into AI machine learning space around 2008. And around 2012, we saw a huge spike and uptick in investments that were made in the space. So first 3-4 years were a bit of struggle. But 2012 onwards, everything sort of fell in place for AI machine learning startups, specifically our startups. So a couple of unicorns behind me in that 2008 to 2012, 13 timeframe. And then started my own, as well as joined a few venture-backed startups in communication space. So I've moved from just overall AI, leveraging AI across operations, across marketing, across sales, and other use cases, into communication use cases, which is specific to anywhere in the customer journey when customers need to communicate, whether it's via voice, video, or messaging. So I've focused last 5 years of my energy in the space, and last 1 year is with AWS.
Right. And, now that you were saying about like the different communications and the different ways of communicating through video, through voice, and, text, and you also mentioned about the large language models and everything else. How do you think that artificial intelligence will change not so much the way we communicate with it, but rather the way we communicate among ourselves. Because, for example, when social media came out, and, with social media now that's been out there for a while, I mean, there was even a new language kind of like, well, obviously not a whole new language, but like new parts of that language that were kind of like invented, right? Things that started making sense only once you're posting them on social media, and contractions, and, then came the memes as well. Like there were different ways in which suddenly people were communicating ideas that before they were communicated in a different way. So do you think that will be the case now that we are starting to use a lot more communication with the AI systems? Will we implement those? Will there be modifications? Will we have those modifications in our daily lives with other people? How do you think that will happen, or if it will at all?
Yeah, I think, first thing I will just say a disclaimer, these are my views, because obviously, even within AWS and within any organization, there are very diverse views around this. So I will just share my personal views on this, how I see it. And obviously, please feel free to differ or, debate and, disagree with that. But I think the way we communicate is already changing. If you just look at interaction with machines, right, with, kids just assume everything is touchscreen in the world, right? Like, I mean, I don't have kids myself, but I was at a friend's place, and this kid was watching some YouTube cartoons, and was pointing at the TV, and I brought him closer to the TV, and he starts touching the screen, thinking this will change the TV screen. Like for him, that's intuitive. The way we interact with devices, that's already changed. We have Alexa, we have different video devices. My refrigerator has a camera inside, and it has Alexa built in. So I can actually see stuff even remotely, that what am I running out of milk or something else. So the devices are allowing more visibility and the way we communicate with just devices alone. So communication is a broader spectrum. So I'm basically including devices in the scope here. That's why I'm sharing these couple of device interactions that we've been having. And it's changing how we interacted with these devices before the touchscreen, iPhones, and others. Like the expectation has changed how we communicate with machines and what machines offer to us. And then you move over to just these audio aspects of like voice, which is Siri, Cortana, Google devices. I think Google Home is what it's called. And Siri, yeah, there are several of these. And we are kind of using them as digital errands, right? Turn off lights and turn on security, or check my order status, things like that. So we are already interacting with devices in this manner. And people-to-people communication, like you said, it's also changed with social media, right? Memes is a language in itself. I mean, I see a lot of people only sending memes and do not communicate, my parents included. I mean, they talk to me in memes now. So it's a new language for sure between us, right? Between people. And social media has major influence on how we are communicating. I think the art of language, the finer aspect of language, to some degree, that will have to adapt a little bit, right? How we communicate and express ourselves. So when it relates to business in contact center industry, or in, with large language models, so there is an expectation that you just can interact with the device. You don't no longer want to. I think more and more people, especially younger generation, like generally, and I'm generalizing, not everybody's the same, but still, like I said, it's my own view. Younger generation generally is more comfortable talking to an entity, and they're very easily, they see machines as friends, versus talking to a human. It's sometimes awkward, sometimes not as natural first instinct. But then there's another spectrum of people who do prefer voice first. So I think the short answer is really we have to be thinking about all of the people across that spectrum, those who want to just purely communicate with machines, and those who just want to communicate with humans. And the only thing what we can do is offer them the right tools and the right platform and offerings, which make their communication more seamless, more error-free, right? Like the struggle with recording, the struggle with joining meetings in the beginning. I think Zoom solved that problem, and the industry followed, right? One-click join, do not. It's like, I remember the days when every time you had a meeting, you had to install something, even on your browser, which took 10 minutes away from meetings. So how can we make technology simpler and easier, faster for people to just facilitate that communication? And that's really where I am focused, because technology should be enabler, not get in the way. Just enable and get out of the way, right? Like just leave it open for those who want to communicate either with a machine or with a human. And by machine, I do mean Alexa, I do mean IVRs and other intelligent machine interactions that we already have. in this world.
Right. And you know that with what you were saying, just I just remembered that there was this study that I read the other day. I am sorry I can't quote the source right now, but it just came to my mind. But you know, it turned out that in that, but it was all over the news that they had made a study with people that were talking to. Some of them were talking to machines, and some of them were talking to humans. And it turned out that people were thinking that it was about in between. It was like in a patient-doctor scenario, and it turned out that people thought that machines were more empathic than humans. You know, which is it's interesting. Of course, now after that they told them, hey, this is a machine, but you know, they thought it that way. So I wanted to ask you, how do you see? I mean, I think that those are great opportunities, and it shows like the great progress, and there are also some. Perhaps some risk associated to people saying machines are more empathic than people. So how do you see that? Do you see that as something that was just meant to happen, as something good, or do you see some implications of people perhaps thinking that machines can be more empathic than other people?
Yeah, that's a great question. And sorry for all these questions. I have very long answers.
No, that's fine.
I think it's a very subjective thing to say that machines are more empathic, because you can say that about people too, right? Like you can say, oh, Vikram is Vikram has high degree of empathy, or Vikram doesn't have any empathy at all, right? Two different, like, people about the same person, me, can have two different views, which could be 180 degrees apart. So it just depends on what kind of interactions that you're having, right? And what is that interaction experience? Right? If you're trying to rebook your tickets and there's a machine that helps you do this with highest degree of empathy, right? Or if it was a human, in both cases, you might feel that you accomplished a task. It was minimal friction, and that's where the technology should get in and get out of the way, right? Like enable that interaction, and that could be perceived as empathy, right? A high degree of empathy within either a machine or a human. And on the other hand, if there is a highly empathetic human who has tools that they're struggling with to use and help a customer, and customer think this person does not even understand their problem, right? Oh, I cannot close your account. You have to walk into the branch. Oh my God, you're like, you don't understand. I can't go. I have, all these emergency situations, whatever, right? You might think that this human is not empathetic maybe to your situation, but they don't have the tools. Really, that is the problem maybe in that case. So I feel that empathy is a little bit subjective, or any emotion that we demonstrate as humans, right? That's why we're complex creatures, because it's not a very subjective thing. I know large language models do summarization and lots of interesting subjective things, right? What is the topic of this conversation? Was this a good conversation or not? If you asked somebody in sales, every customer conversation was the greatest ever, and if you asked a technology person about the same question, they're highly skeptical. I don't think they're going to do anything. So you can perceive the same conversation differently. And then if a large language model thinks that they will summarize that effectively and accurately, satisfying every single viewpoint, it's just not, it's not easy. Because you almost need to convert a subjective thing in a very objective thing. It's, in my experience at least, in last and I've only spent 5 years in this space, so trying to bring AI into conversations, and it's a challenge, because that subjectivity will always be there. And that's really where we need to just be aware that what are the different biases and perceptions, and how can technology bridge the gap and bring it closer, or be transparent about an outcome. We arrived at an outcome through AI, in specifically around emotional sentiment and tone of voice and all those different aspects, before we pass a judgment.
Yeah, and I think that, for example, you've mentioned several times that technology should be like an enabler, right? And then enable something, then get out of the way. And it's interesting because you're saying, for example, in the case of empathy, that it's, well, and I agree with you, it's subjective. Like some people might say he has a higher degree of empathy than this other person, and she has like higher degree of empathy that this other person might think about the same thing about computers. But how can we decide when technology should get out of the way? I mean, it's been an enabler, and because it's also kind of like a blurry line, right? Like some people might want to keep talking to it, or some people might say, I've accomplished a task, as you're saying, in both cases, with both a human and a computer, perhaps you've accomplished a task. But it's the case that sometimes you just want to keep talking to the person on the other side of the line, because they're very nice, they're a very nice a guy, very nice girl, or you just want to keep talking. So how do you know, or how do you decide, or how do you think as a society we should decide? Okay, the technology has accomplished the task. Now, let us humans continue. How do you think that process should be?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of examples in conversational space and even outside of it as well. Like where, so if you imagine the life of an agent today, they say, every time, because I have these conversations a lot, like for many years now in communication space. The one phrase that I hear a lot is that agents don't have an inch of space on their screen and they have multiple screens in front of them, right? So how much technology can you use about one conversation, right? You're being pushed and bombarded with these notifications. Oh, this customer's bought XYZ, this phone, sell him a new case, or this person just had a baby. She probably wants diaper subscription, like whatever, right? Just a lot of this noise that it can get, over analysis and over intelligence. Like I think there needs to be a point of the choice has to be left to the individual what they prefer. Some people prefer, like, they're very statistical, number driven, mathematical, right? Like their brain works like a calculator. Like they want every number possible in front of them. So it should be an option chosen by that individual. Oh, okay, I want a lot of information before I go into any conversation. And some people prefer, okay, give me the cliff notes. I just need that. I know, okay, they're trying to cancel. Okay, that's all I need to know. I'll handle this, right? Through my empathy, through relationship, and through other aspects. But some people might want every single data. Oh, what cancellation legal terms for what was the last 10 pages they visited on our website, or legal terms. And, I want to see specifically why they want to cancel. Is it cost? Is it, whatever reasons? That choice needs to be with the human, is what I mean. And it will, again, vary, unfortunately, right? Like not a single rule of thumb for everybody, but again, it also not just on the business side, but also on the people to people or consumer to consumer, even that side. There needs to be a choice in the end, right? Like, so ChatGPT is there. You can use it to do all of your work, or like I think students are using it for writing papers and essays. I think that sometimes that choice we can end up making not a very accurate choice in the long run for ourselves. But if somebody's using it just to find, for example, oh, thank you for a positive response. No, thank you for affirmative response, right? Like there is, if you want trying to do that, just polish things, that is a different matter. So it also is left to the individual choice. And we are humans, we make mistakes. So sometimes the choices we make may not be accurate, but it is at least, I think what technology should do is provide that, the choice, and also to some degree help people make the right choice based on whatever technology has learned about an individual. Not necessarily one size fits all approach in that regard, like where technology should get out of the way. For another example in non-conversational aspect is like and I love this example a lot, which is this ABS, the active braking. So when there's a danger or somebody's in front of you, the auto braking that most of the cars now these days have, anti-collision. It is an AI system that's using visual aid sensors and lots of calculations in real time, right? The speed, time to brake, and lots of different environmental conditions. It is an AI at play, but we've accepted it in our life. We just say, this is automatic braking, right? And that's simplifying and giving it a name in the end. I'm a huge fan of that, because that means we have actually accepted AI in our lives, in that aspect of our life, and we just call it something else. Right? But there is a lot of intelligence behind this.
Yeah, no, and I think that what you're saying, I think it's crucial. Like whenever we give a name to something, or to product, to something, as you say, we already make it ours, right? It's like already part of our life. We start calling it, and then sometimes, well, particularly in English and in Spanish, I'm from Mexico, it doesn't happen that much, but you convert it even to verbs, right? So now you call it like you just Ubered somewhere, or things like that, or you just Google something, or something like that. But interesting, Vic, I wanted to ask you. You say, well, the choice should be left to in the end, it should be a choice of the consumer, right? But it's interesting because technology is just moving so quickly, and of course we're all humans, and sometimes we make mistakes. It's interesting because we're giving people many choices, and sometimes it's about things they don't really get, right? So sometimes it's about things they don't really understand, and with implications that they don't really grasp. So how much, I mean, how much choice should be given to people? Should we let them decide everything, or should we have like? And I understand, I agree with you actually that not there's not a size that fits all. But in the end, and you mentioned it at the beginning, regarding privacy, like as well. I mean, if you go and decide to eat something, if there are like 150 different restaurants, it's going to take you a very long time to decide, where to eat. And it might actually, you might end up eating at a place perhaps that you don't like that much because there are just so many options. Whereas if you have 10 or something, you'll say, okay, well, I don't like salads, or I like salads. I don't really like Chinese food, so I'm going to go with the salads. And, it's a lot easier. How much choice do you think that people should have on this? Is it a matter of letting them choose everything? And if so, perhaps with some education background, letting them know how it works? Or how do you envision people making choices with all these different systems? Again, of things that maybe and many times they just don't know how they work.
And I think this is where the statistics and statistical work comes into the picture. I mean, I take very basic example of driving in traffic, right? There are two types of people who are driving, especially if you have carpool lanes, right? So there are two types of cars that drive. One are, high occupancy, and the other is just single occupancy. And the time to reach a destination is going to be different. And you do not need to ask whether you're in HOV lane or you're in the normal lane. You can actually predict that automatically. So you don't need the user to, while driving, pick and make choices. You can make the choice on behalf of the driver because they're going much faster. Average speed is slower. So you can make the choice on their behalf in this example. So that is a choice made by technology, but based on a lot of statistics and the environmental other conditions, right? But in case sometimes the technology should eliminate and that choosing and should choose for you, but sometimes you should be able to make that right decision, right? Like, there are more complex applications, like even in a dating scenario, right? Like matchmaking and things like that, right? So there's a lot more complex scenarios where you do not want AI to make a choice for you, and there needs to be a lot of interaction and other factors that will be involved, right? And then that might be maybe you can eliminate saying, okay, a certain age group or whatever the different preferences are for people, and maybe location is a factor sometimes, right? So you can just figure out within each application, within each how technology plays a role in that specific quote unquote customer journey, and see which touch points where we can bring the choice back into the consumer's half, and where we can make the choice on their behalf, right? Like, for example, optimally, not having a lag in communication technology. Another example. So if we had, I think here people must be like, I'm assuming across time zones, and like I'm in Eastern time zone right now, but the latency of my voice is very likely that you're not experiencing a lot of delay in my lip movement speaking and it reaching your speaker phones. And that's because there's a shortest distance to a server, and there are direct peering or dedicated line connectivity across multiple locations that Zoom perhaps is using in an architectural way. Even if I was in a remote part of, let's say, Australia somewhere, and it would still work this seamlessly. It's because of some of the technology decisions have been taken by the technology, right? I am in New York, and I only want to connect in New York and within New York. Like, that choice is, we're not making it complex for consumers to choose. I think some of the choices should already be made. But when it comes to recommendations, like you said about the restaurant use case, it is based on human preference. And I'll tell you this personal example that you're used to something and you just can't overnight change it. I mean, my upbringing has been with mostly a lot of carb in my diet. I'm trying to reduce, but it just doesn't happen easily, right? So when I get recommendation, there's pizzas and a lot of carb based options. But that's basically the choice that I've made all my life. And it just continues. Technology just keeps reinforcing, even though I'm trying to change. Unless I make a specific input there that I do not, I want low carb, or low fat, whatever diet, then that's a choice that I should be allowed to make. And then those recommendations need to adapt to my choice.
Right. And this is interesting because language, for example, There are certain in your, like, I don't know, the tone of your voice, and there are many things that can affect how people decide. Little things that can lead people, help them decide, if you will, or that might cause a reaction in someone else. And I am wondering, for example, in the case of communication or voice communication with AI, but it happens the same, of course, with written communication. What do you think, or what effects? I mentioned one at the beginning about these people feeling that the computer was more empathic than, had a higher degree of empathy than other people. But all these small things about tone, about the sort of voice that you're using to communicate with human beings, when there's a communication from AI to a human being, how do you determine, for example, the tone of voice that perhaps, the any of these different solutions should be using? How do you determine what sort of, particularly in those small nuances? I mean, and I know, as you're saying, that there's, of course, many statistics in the back of all this, and that the decisions are being made, well, from a computer perspective. But like as humans, what I'm trying to say is, like as humans, we don't know all of that, or we are not aware of all that when we're having that conversation. We're just having that conversation, and at that point in time, there comes this small perception that the system is recommending us this or recommending us that, and we figure things about enthusiasm, the way someone's talking, the way someone's saying something to us. So how do you see that evolving with all of these different AI systems?
Yeah, I think definitely I feel that there's a lot of room for improvement, and there's a lot of ways to go for technology to be very accurate on tonal analysis, or even the sentiment analysis, because human emotions are very complex. Anger, frustration, and a lot of emotions are very subtle, right? In variability, like the difference between the emotions is very small. So you cannot just waveform everything and then say, okay, this spectrum is pretty high, and so this must be somebody angry. Maybe they're very happy and they're just loud. There's a lot of room for technology to improve there. There are various techniques that, I mean, if you're interested, I can talk a bit about those technologies that are generally applied in this scenario. One of them is basically separating a mixed voice. So if we have 10 people speaking, right, just the ability to separate those voices to accurately understand, which voice belongs to which, person one, person two, person three, and then analyzing the emotion. Like if you tried aggregate, a lot of conversations actually tend to be very neutral. The general sense is because what happens behind the scenes is that human ears can hear around, I think, something around 300 milliseconds or above, but AI can hear much more granular than that. So for AI, there's a lot of silence on our conversation right now. If you really asked AI, were we silent? Like, yeah, for a long time. How do you guys communicate? You're not speaking for such a long time, but it's not a very long time from human perception. There's techniques to isolate those silent moments. There's various techniques that are used to apply and shrink that down, and also separate the voices. Now, I've had situations where I was the only person speaking, and if I did the separation, sometimes I would see two or three people, because my tone also varied, from a baseline spectrum. So there are technologies like that which will continue to improve, and so these are some of the challenges that technology has to address to improve. But it will surely, there's so much room to improve, and there is a lot of data and science behind all of this, that I do not doubt the improvements. Will it be at a human level, and by when? That is more of a debatable question, I think. But definitely a lot of progress is being made. I can assure you that our science team, I mean, like a lot of folks are working on this kind of problem. I do know across industry, across companies, that this is an important topic, because unlocking this means we've unlocked emotional response, and emotional understanding for AI systems or computer systems, which is a huge leap than it sounds, right? Just getting sentiment and tone, it's a big deal. Yeah.
I think this has honestly been wonderful, Vic. It's been an honor to be able to ask you these questions. Thank you so much for your very enlightening answers.
It's an honor to be here and be with you for an hour. Appreciate all your time and questions, and absolutely happy to meet everyone here.
Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good day. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Stay tuned to listen to more recordings and interviews with experts from around the world. In the meantime, follow and rate our podcast on your favorite podcast platform and share with your friends. Don't forget to follow us on our social media as well. We're on LinkedIn and X. Thank you for joining us today.